Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to discuss whether or not my Dodge Viper is officially getting totaled out. For anyone new to the channel, I had a low-speed collision. I've done two videos, one that goes over what actually happened and caused the crash, and the other one that has the full damage estimate both from the shop and from my own estimate. Both of those are going to be linked in the description below, but today we're going to go over all the final numbers that I got from the insurance company to go over kind of the valuation of the car. I'll go over the math that I did to decide whether or not it was financially worth repairing this car, and at the end I will officially reveal what my decision was and the fate of the car. But the more observant among you will probably already know what the outcome is going to be based just on the tone of my voice. So with that, let's get into it. For anyone who's not aware, the general insurance process goes like this. First, you crash a car, you report the accident and everything like that. They get the total damage estimate, and if the car has over a certain percentage of its value in damage, they are allowed to total out the car. And that value differs depending on the insurance company, depending on the state, depending on a number of things. They consider it a constructive loss at that point because if a car has, 40 to 60% of its value is usually the cutoff threshold. If it's more damage than that, even if you fix it, the car still got pretty beat up. So in some cases, it's just better to total it out. So that's the first thing to get considered. What's the total value of the car versus what's the value of the damage? Or if you do decide to total a car, what they give you is something called the scrap value, so that you decide if you want the car still, if you want to either rebuild it on your own or if you want to part it out on your own. They give you a price that you still buy the car back from them at that price. Then they still give you a check for the difference between that price and what the total market value of the car is. So if you just total it out and they get to keep the car, you get the full market value, or what they assess to be the market value, which is typically below what the true market value is. Or if you buy it back, you get a check for the difference, assuming that the car is paid off. But if you still owe more than what the scrap value is worth and more than the difference that they're giving you compared to the market value, the thing is that you have to pay out of pocket to cover that difference. Now at this point, I own the car outright, so I don't have to worry about that cash difference. But if you're in the same situation where you're kind of doing this math, you have to factor in how much you still owe on the car. So I said in the other video that I was waiting on some more information from the insurance company. That's basically what I was waiting on, was what do they consider to be the market value and the scrap value for this car. I did a lot of work to this car, getting it paint corrected, getting it ceramic coated, refinishing the wheels, doing a lot of things to make this like the most perfect version of this car that I could feasibly make it. And for the people who are newer here, I will link some of those videos in the description below just so you can see what the car looked like prior to being crashed. The car has about 40,000 miles, just under that at this point. But to get a comparable condition and a comparable mileage Viper to this one, in the current market, that's somewhere around $55,000 to $60,000 at the point of entry. You can get higher mileage ones, and I'm talking literally anywhere from 60 to 80,000 miles on them, and those are a little bit cheaper. But for one with 40,000 miles or less and one with perfect condition paint, which this one had up until the point I went on my off-road excursion, you cannot even look at them for less than $55,000. So naturally, the insurance company's assessment of the car was $43,000. Now I tried to go back and forth with my insurance company on this and tried to negotiate that price up, but they pretty much refused to budge, and I really don't have the leverage to make them change that price. All of the ones that they used for their price examples of the ones that recently sold are in the southern states where the market is cheaper, they were higher mileage, they were worse condition. Basically, they said, what's the bottom dollar amount that a Viper can be worth, and took some of the rattiest higher mileage examples, which are literally 2 to 3 times the mileage of mine, and said that's now your assigned value. And again, those are in southern states. I'm up in New Hampshire, so I would also have to transport the car up here even if I got it for that amount, which would cost me another $1,000 to $2,000. So ignoring the fact that I would have to transport it here and I would be getting a much worse example and that this is horrifically undervalued, after you take out the deductible for my accident, if I were to total the car and just get rid of it entirely, I would get $42,500 back. And once again, that is not enough money to go out and buy another one of these with a clean title in comparable condition. So I definitely had a lot less into it than what it's worth, but I cannot get close even remotely close to replacing it for what the insurance company is going to give me. I bought mine for just over $35,000. And again, that's only because I bought it before the market took off. I did all the work myself and I timed it at the right point of the year and I negotiated well to get as much money off as I could because I was buying an ugly example. Then I took this really bad example and turned it into one that was really nice by doing all this work. So for anyone else who has a rare or exotic car, especially like a Viper, I really highly suggest that you go and reevaluate your insurance and make sure that you don't get the cheapest company you can find, but that you get one that will agree to insure it for an agreed upon value. And then you can say, okay, this is the dollar amount I'm insuring it for, so if it gets totaled in any circumstances, this is what you have to pay out. Doesn't matter what the market is, that is the dollar amount. So even if the market goes down, if the market goes up, whatever you agree upon, that is the amount that you get. Again, I've never crashed a car before. I didn't think I would be needing my insurance anyhow, so I never really thought about this. But lesson learned for any of the other Viper owners out there, or any of the other car guys even, an insurance company's job is to try to make money, and the way they do that is by screwing you over when they're supposed to pay out. So right off the bat, I don't want to total the car based on that amount that they would give me. I can't replace it for that amount, and even the other cars I like that I would consider as replacements, most notably is the Shelby GT350, those have gone up just as much as the Viper has in recent years, and those are also now in the $60,000 range. So it's not like there's a replacement I can get either for that price point, so I don't really like that as an option. So the next option is, what if I did total the car and I took the scrap value, and then I could either repair it on my own or part it out on my own. So what I did is I took the spreadsheet I had from last time and I expanded it a bit, and I made this, and I'm hoping this transition works well. But what I did is I took my full list of everything that was damaged and the cost to replace it, and I calculated not only what the parts value is, and then eliminated all the labor to see what it would cost me to fix it if I did only the parts. I also said, what are things that I can eliminate and not replace that I could potentially live without, or that I could potentially spend my own time to try to repair. So for example, in the other video, I said how the door for this car is like $3,500 for a new one, and I took a massive chunk out of mine. And I also said how the fiberglass shops around me probably aren't good enough to repair that because the damage goes into the fiberglass laminate pretty deep. But I said, you know, what if I tried to do it myself, or what if I just Bondo bombed it, or what if I did something to not have to buy a full door? What would it cost me to replace it? Then what if I did that with the rocker panel? And is there any way to weld in a new section for the structural frame instead of doing that? And what if I didn't replace the wheel liner, and instead maybe I just did like the zip tie stitch to get it together? And what if I did that for the front bumper as well? Or if I Bondoed and fiberglassed the front bumper myself to get it back together? So I went through all of these scenarios for pretty much every part that was on the list, including the maybe items. I took out as many of those maybe items as I could, other than the ones that I've confirmed at this point, or that the body shop at this point has confirmed are damaged. And then I said, based on the price of those and what the scrap value of the car is, that is what the insurance company would charge me to buy the car back, what is the total amount of money that I would have into this car to get it to be a running, driving, salvage title car, versus what is the value of a running, driving, salvage title Viper. So then that way I could know, is it even financially worth repairing this beyond the fact of me just wanting to keep it, and what is really the value of me wanting to keep it. I also tried to factor in that I don't necessarily have 100% of the tools. I'll probably have to buy a few tools and stuff as well. So making a lot of assumptions, assuming that my work is going to be good, assuming that I can do a decent job and have the car look okay afterwards, and assuming that there's no major hidden damage that I didn't account for, and that all the maybes I eliminated can truly be eliminated and don't need to be replaced, which again I think is an extremely unlikely scenario. There's basically no situation in which I spend less than $10,000 to $15,000 on parts and materials, which if you watch the last video is $5,000 to $10,000 below the lower threshold for what I could spend on used parts. I did a lot of research and a lot of corner cutting almost just to see what is the cheapest way I could possibly repair this car. The scrap value that the insurance company gave me for the car is $22,500, which means the insurance company thinks a totaled Viper is worth $22,500 in parts, which I think is a ridiculous amount of money for a totaled shell of a car. And frankly, my insurance company agrees, because the adjuster I got, she's actually pretty good. She said not only is this the highest valuation she has ever seen for a car this age, she also said this is one of the highest scrap values, not only for a car this age, but of any car she has ever seen after doing this for years. So if you take the scrap value and the price of the parts that I have to replace, my calculated total for the cheapest possible way that I could get this car back to street legal again was $32,825. And again, that assumes that it all comes out perfectly, it repasses my state inspection, which New Hampshire is notoriously one of the most difficult state inspections, especially for salvage vehicles, and it assumes I don't uncover any other issues and I don't have any of those maybes. So more realistically, it'll be $35,000 to $40,000 total into the car out of my pocket just to get this thing back on the road and in a road legal condition. But the biggest variable that I did not mention in the damage estimate is if there is frame damage to this car. Now, all the suspension points got hit very hard. A bunch of the mounting tabs were bent, and if you saw the other video, you'll notice that almost all of the suspension components were either severely bent or straight up broken into several pieces. The fact that all of those suspension components, which were fairly beefy, got smashed that badly, I can pretty much guarantee you that the frame behind it was also damaged. There is almost no doubt in my mind, and there's two places beyond the mounting points that I found when I was editing the other footage where I found that the frame was either dented in or took a solid chunk out of it from one of those other parts smashing through it in the accident. So I have no idea how much damage is there. I have no idea how expensive that's going to be to pull, but there's no scenario that I can think of where it's going to be less than $2,000 to $3,000 to figure out and repair the frame damage. That's why I think it's realistically going to be closer to a total of $40,000 out of pocket to get this thing back on the road if I did the work myself. So already, when you look at it this way, totaling it out to then buy it back and repair it on my own does not make sense when I could just have the shop do it. They're going to do a better job than I can. And then if it's not done right, I can just give it back to them and I don't have to worry about it. It's also going to take me a lot longer to source and repair all these parts. It's a lot of downtime for the car, whereas the shop has the facilities to do this. They're doing it full time. They can do the repairs a lot faster. So me repairing it is pretty much ruled out at this point. But next is, what if I bought the car back after it got totaled and then I just parted out everything on my own to try to make a profit? Now, as I showed in the other video with the estimate, even the used parts are absurd on this car. They are ridiculously expensive. What I did is I took a total of pretty much everything that was still usable in the car, which is everything other than that front right side, basically. And I pretty much did the same thing where I went through, I added up what I could find for used prices on all of them, and there's some odds and ends that like are kind of weird ones that I couldn't really find a price for. So at the end I said, okay, I've got all these miscellaneous parts, and I'll bucket all those together too. That'll be another $500 or $1,000. But on the other hand, I don't want to price everything like it's made out of gold. If you overprice it and there's two used parts available, they're not going to pick yours and you're going to be sitting on it forever. It also gives people the opportunity to come in and undercut your prices so theirs get sold and yours don't. So for that reason, you got to be a little more competitive on the pricing. So my values, I think, were a little bit lower to factor that in. The total that I calculated is between $29,500 and $35,500. So even if I bought the car out for $22,500, I would still have a profit between $7,000 and $13,000. But I want to make this clear, that's if I can sell the parts. My biggest concern here is, I've said this in a number of videos, these are rare cars, but if they need body panels, that means they crashed the car. So let's just think about this for a second logistically. Whoever needs these parts has to have a Dodge Viper. Then they have to be putting actual miles on it, and then they have to crash it. But not only that, they have to crash it in a way that is different than how you crashed yours so that the panels you have are of use to them. Then they have to decide to not total it out, so it can't be too damaged. Then they have to decide to repair it with used parts. Then of all the used parts out there, they have to pick you as the used parts supplier. So when you factor in all these steps, the probability of someone actually needing these parts and then choosing you to get these parts, on one hand, there's not as many parts available, so the odds go up a little bit, but the probability of it even getting to the stage where somebody needs them in the first place, not particularly high. So when you actually do the math and when you look at how long some of these listings have been sitting around, there's a very real chance that I will have this car sitting in my garage in pieces that I can't get rid of quite yet because there's just enough parts left over still, taking up my only garage bay, preventing me from having another car, preventing me from having another project, for the hopes that I make realistically $7,000 to $10,000 over the next 1 to 2 years. Or on the other hand, I can just put in overtime at my job or pick up a part-time gig and make at least that much money working probably less hours than it would take me to dissect this car, because I am not a professional at ripping cars apart. Then I've got to list it, then I've got to respond to people and send them more photos and then actually ship it and follow up. There's just a lot more work involved than you might initially think. And if this was like a Toyota Camry, I could list it locally and tell people to come and show up. But because it's not, because this is a specialty rare car, I probably will have to ship the parts. I've got to figure out how to package them. I've got to worry about shipping costs. It just makes the level of effort so high to try to part out this car that in my mind, it would take so long and so much time that it wouldn't be worth the return you get, if you even get that return. Plus, like I said, I would lose the opportunity to get another car in the meantime. I wouldn't be able to drive anything else. So I would lose the enjoyment of not having a different car, and then every time I go into my garage, I would have to stare down the mistake I made and stare directly at the Viper that is now probably the current record holder for being totaled at the lowest speed impact. And I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't think, beyond the monetary side of it, that I can just mentally deal with seeing my dream car totaled and picked apart in my garage every day. So at least for me, on this car, the risk is too high and the return is too low for me to buy it back to part it out. It just does not make sense to me. Which, if you're following along, means the only option left is to have the shop repair the car, which is kind of what I want to do anyhow in this situation. But, and this is a big but, that's not going to happen, and that's not an option, and here's why. I said in the other video how insurance companies like to use used or aftermarket parts. But even when they go to OEM parts, they will only get them through certain suppliers so that they can get them as cheap as possible. So at least for my insurance company, they refuse to let you get parts through eBay or through Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or even through like the Viper warehouse stores online who stockpile these things knowing they were going to be discontinued. They won't let you go to those suppliers because someone at some point in time committed insurance fraud by listing the front fender for a Toyota Camry, which is a $200 part, for let's say $1,000 on eBay, and then the body shop chose that one because that was the one they had to have, or the only one in stock, thereby creating an extra $700 of profit because they're buying it off someone they knew. So I get why insurance companies do that as a general practice to try to avoid people going to somebody they know and getting kickbacks and paying more out of pocket. But what it means here, what it means for me and what it means for my Viper, is that they don't have any suppliers with the parts I need, and they refuse to go externally to get these parts. Which means the insurance company said they literally cannot get me a fender through their sources, and they have to buy it through their sources, nor are they going to go out and make a mold to manufacture new fenders for me anytime soon. And if they can't get parts, this car has to get totaled. So as much as I want this car to live on, as much as this has been and continues to be my dream car, it doesn't matter what I say or what I do at this point. I've tried working with the adjuster, I've tried elevating it to get special approvals. There is no way that they are willing to work with me to now get this car rebuilt, because of how high risk all those maybe items are, because of that cost, and because they can only get all of the parts pretty much through these third-party vendors. Now, the biggest issue they had was finding a fender through one of their suppliers. So what all of this comes down to is that my car is getting totaled after a roughly 20-mile-per-hour impact, because there are no fenders left for Dodge Vipers, which is absolutely crushing and I absolutely hate. Now, I'm trying to be an optimist here, right? I'm still okay, and I don't think having the car totaled is necessarily the worst thing possible. I've already filmed the whole separate video on why that is. I'll link that below. But even though this isn't the outcome I wanted, it sucks. I still have to live with it. I'm losing the dream car that I worked so hard and sacrificed so much to get for parts availability, and that is a very, very difficult pill to swallow. So for any of the viewers out there who have a rare or exotic car, make sure you check with your insurance company to not only have an agreed upon value in the event that something does happen to you, but also ask these questions of, hey, if we don't have parts availability, what happens to this car? See if you can set up contingencies and get something in writing saying that they're willing to wait for used parts, that they're willing to buy through eBay or through third-party vendors. Because if you don't, and something like this happens to you as it happened to me, you might be losing your dream as well. So with all that in mind and with all the numbers that we went over today, it doesn't make sense for me to part out the car on my own. It also does not make sense for me to rebuild the car on my own, because even though I can go out and buy parts from whoever I want to if I were to do that, there are too many variables. And like I said, there's no way for me to realistically rebuild this car and get it back on the road for less than probably $35,000 to $40,000. I can buy right now a salvage title Viper that already has gone through the retitling and reinspection process for that price point. In fact, there's one across town for me that's been listed for the last 4 months for $28,500. Now, granted, that one's got a few mechanical issues. That one has horrendous paint and looks like it was rattle can resprayed. But even a quote unquote nicer salvage one, still at the $40,000 ballpark, it doesn't make sense for me to source parts and spend a year or two replacing this when I can get rid of this for $42,500, then go out and just buy one and enjoy it tomorrow and still have the same salvage title history and comparable miles. And even if I were to rebuild it and then try to sell it afterwards, I can't sell it for more than what I have into it between the buyback and the parts, and that doesn't even include any of my time for the labor. Then you have to think about the logistics of selling a salvage title Viper. Nobody wants to buy a salvage title car, especially for this much money, when for a little bit more you can just get a clean title one. And that's why the one at $28,000 has not sold. And specifically, if you're looking in this area, if you have mine at $40,000 and one across town that's pretty ratty for $28,500, you can probably respray that car and get everything sorted and still be $5,000 less than what I would be selling mine for. So again, it just does not make sense for me to take this car, as much as that absolutely sucks and it absolutely kills me. But I definitely think with how my ownership experience of this car is ending and how it seems to be coming to a close over something that was so low speed and so trivial, it's a little off-putting, and I'm hoping that long term that this doesn't sour me on the car, considering how much I love this thing, how much fun I've had with it, and how much joy I've been able to share with others driving them around in this. Beyond that, I think I'm a little bit rattled from the accident side, and I'm still working through the legal side too. So I think with all these things going on at once, with just the timing of when this is happening in my life, I just need to step back for a little bit. I need to reset and process this. That way I can come back when I'm ready and actually enjoy this as a hobby again, and I'm not soured on the whole experience. And for those of you watching my channel for the car related content, don't worry, I'm still going to be doing car content. I have to do a formal reveal on my I filmed a ton of videos, and there's a bunch I want to do with that car that I just haven't gotten around to editing because I'm so passionate about doing the Viper stuff. And I don't think this is going to be the end of my spirited driving pursuits. It's probably not even going to be the end of me pursuing Vipers. But with that, I'm probably going to shift gears for a little bit. I've got to edit a bunch of these other things that I filmed that I didn't prioritize just because I like doing the Viper content more. So in a bunch of the videos I post, I'll probably say, oh, my 2004 Viper, it's totaled. I haven't bought a new one. I just filmed those before I crashed the car. And then I felt that this was more important to edit and post before those other videos. But for now, I think with the other things going on in my life on top of this is the right time for me to just total out the car, step away for it for a little bit, focus on my other projects for a little while. But when the timing's right, when I'm mentally prepared for it, believe me, I will be back. I'm going to be doing it right, and I'm going to be doing it big. So this sucks. It absolutely sucks. I hate it. But my gut tells me that the timing is okay and that we're going to make it work. And again, I want to thank you guys for being supportive through my ownership experience. I loved it. I hope you guys enjoyed the ride as well. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.